Picture a small group of early humans on the African savanna, nearly 2 million years ago. It's the middle of the night. They're huddled together, listening to the darkness. And somewhere out there, something is listening back. Something with better night vision, sharper claws, and a body built to kill. We like to imagine our ancestors as mighty hunters, spear in hand, standing fearless at the top of the food chain. But for most of human history, that image is a fantasy. The truth is the exact opposite. For millions of years, we were not the hunters. We were the hunted. We were prey. And the story of how a slow, weak, clawless animal survived in a world full of monsters is the story of how we became human in the first place. Let's start by being honest about how helpless our ancestors actually were. Imagine you are an early hominin, something like Australopithecus, the group that includes the famous Lucy. You stand maybe 3.5 feet tall. You have no claws. Your teeth are flat, made for chewing plants, useless as weapons. You can't run very fast, certainly not fast enough to outrun a big cat. You can't climb as well as a monkey. You have no fur to hide in the grass. You are frankly a soft, slow, meaty package walking around a landscape full of things that would love to eat you. And there were so many things that wanted to eat you. The Africa of 2 or 3 million years ago was not a petting zoo. It was a nightmare of predators, far more terrifying than anything alive today. There were multiple species of saber-toothed cats. There were hyenas the size of bears. There were leopards, lions, and enormous crocodiles in the rivers. And crucially, there were far more of them. By some estimates, the sheer number of large carnivores on that landscape was around 10 times greater than what we see in Africa today. Our ancestors lived every single day completely surrounded by things designed to kill them, and we're not guessing about this. The evidence is written directly onto their bones. Consider one of the most famous fossils in all of human history, the taung child. Discovered in South Africa, it's the skull of a young Australopithecus, only about 3 years old, who lived over 2 million years ago. For a long time, nobody was sure how this child died. But when researchers looked closely, they found distinctive damage, puncture marks in the eye sockets and scratches on the skull. These marks match almost perfectly the damage done by a large bird of prey, an eagle, that would snatch up small primates, kill them, and eat them. That child was carried off and eaten by a giant eagle. Think about that. The threat didn't just come from the ground, it came from the sky. And the taung child is not alone. Look at fossil sites across Africa and you find the same grim story again and again. There are early human bones bearing the unmistakable tooth marks of big cats. At one famous South African site, researchers found hominin skulls with 2 neat puncture holes in them. And when they compared those holes to the fangs of a leopard, they fit exactly. These weren't humans who died and were scavenged. These were humans who were hunted, killed, and dragged up into trees to be eaten, exactly the way leopards still stash their kills today. And just recently, scientists used artificial intelligence to analyze tooth marks on the bones of Homo habilis, an early member of our own genus, from Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. For decades, Homo habilis was thought to be one of the first true hunters, the moment we turned the tables. But the AI matched the bite marks on their bones to leopards, with over 90% confidence. Even as our brains were growing, even as we started making stone tools, we were still on the menu. So just how dangerous was it? Anthropologists have actually estimated the predation rate on early humans, and the number is sobering. Somewhere between 6 and 10% of some early human populations show signs of having been killed by predators. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the same predation rate seen today in savanna antelope and ground-dwelling monkeys, animals we think of as classic prey. That was us. We weren't the lions of our story, we were the gazelles. So this raises the enormous question. If we were this weak, this slow, this outnumbered, and this outgunned, how on earth did we survive? How did a defenseless ape not just avoid extinction, but eventually inherit the entire planet? The answer is not strength. The answer is that being hunted forced us to become clever and forced us to become close. The first and most important survival strategy was simple: safety in numbers. A lone early human on the savannah was a dead early human. But a group was a different matter entirely. In a group, there are many pairs of eyes, many pairs of ears. While some individuals feed or rest, others can watch. A predator relies on ambush, on surprise, on picking off the isolated and the unaware. A tight, alert group destroys that advantage. Suddenly, the leopard creeping through the grass is spotted early, and the element of surprise, its greatest weapon, is gone. This is why our ancestors almost certainly lived in cohesive social groups, and why isolation would have meant death. Being social was not a luxury, it was armor. But they didn't just watch passively. When threatened, groups of primates do something remarkable, something you can still see today in monkeys and apes. They fight back together as a mob. This behavior is called mobbing. Instead of scattering, the group bands together, makes itself loud and large and frightening, throws things, waves branches, and screams. A single small hominin is helpless against a leopard, but 20 of them, screaming and hurling rocks in unison, become a genuine threat, enough to make a big cat decide this particular meal isn't worth the risk. Cooperation turned a group of weak individuals into something a predator would rather avoid. And to do this, they had to communicate. They needed alarm calls to signal danger. Different sounds perhaps for a threat from the ground versus a threat from the air. share. They needed to coordinate, to act as one. Many researchers believe that this constant life-or-death pressure to warn each other, to work together, and to outthink predators was one of the great engines driving the evolution of our social intelligence and eventually of language itself. We may talk today, in part, because our ancestors needed to shout danger yesterday. Then over time, our ancestors added tools to the equation, and the balance began slowly to shift. At first, stone tools weren't for hunting big game. They were for processing food, cracking bones, cutting meat scavenged from carcasses the real predators had left behind. But eventually came the true game changer, weapons that worked at a distance. A sharpened wooden spear, and much later a thrown spear, meant that for the first time, a human could hurt a predator without being within reach of its claws and teeth. Distance is safety. A creature that can strike from 10 feet away is a completely different kind of animal than one that has to grapple. And then the ultimate weapon, one that no other animal on Earth could wield: fire. The control of fire, which became widespread later in our history, changed everything about the night. Remember, darkness was the time of maximum terror, when the night-hunting cats held every advantage. But predators are instinctively afraid of fire. A campfire pushed back the darkness. It created a ring of safety. It let our ancestors finally sleep, protected, while the flames kept the watching eyes at bay. Fire didn't just cook our food. Fire guarded our sleep. So look at what actually saved us. Not fangs, not claws, not brute strength. We survived because we stuck together, because we watched out for one another, because we cooperated and communicated and shared the job of staying alive. We survived because we got smart and because we got social. And here's the most profound part of this whole story. The very traits we consider most deeply human, our intense social bonds, our teamwork, our communication, our empathy for the members of our group, may have been forged precisely by the experience of being prey. The predators that hunted us in the dark didn't just shape our fears, they shaped our friendships, they shaped our minds. In a very real sense, we became human not by conquering the world as fearless hunters, but by surviving it together as frightened prey. We were the hunted, and that, more than anything, is what taught us to be human.